Hey patrons, welcome back to Storytime with Carl. This is for the month of July 2019. I'm sitting here in my man room. We just had 4th of July celebration, fireworks, great food. I'm sitting in a great room with lots of expensive souvenirs and everything. Got good coffee. I need a table to sit my coffee cup on. I have a tall ammo can, sits right there. I mean, people in the military, we're kind of used to using cots, ammo cans, water boxes, stuff like that for furniture. I know you guys get a kick out of my tour of my man room. Matter of fact, if you're new patrons, you can actually scroll down through some of our older Patreon videos, and I did a video tour of my man room. You'll see I have a lot of expensive stuff here. I do, and all these items, no matter what patch it is, or I can grab pretty well any one of these little items. They've all got stories behind them. Every one of these bullets has got a story behind it. Some of these, I got knives here in the glass behind me. Some of these knives are worth $2,000–$3,000. I've got gold plaques. I've got very rare bottles of alcohol. I've got all kinds of stuff. This story time with Carl, I want to talk about this little souvenir right here. What is it? I appreciate you asking. It's a porcupine quill. Porcupine quill. It's not always about having expensive stuff, not at all. And Independence Day celebration, if you haven't noticed, I'm proud to be an American. And a lot of the schools, for their senior high school class trip before graduation, they go to resorts and they go to water parks and everything. Beverly Hills actually sent their senior class to Europe for 2 weeks, I think. My daughter's senior class trip, they went to a water park, I think. What I wish they would do, take all those seniors in high school and send them to a second, or even better, a third world country, and just let them spend a couple days there. And I'll tell you what, if you could see some of the poor that's out there in the world, they would be a lot prouder of their nation, whether it's America or, for those of you from Australia or Poland or Finland. I've got viewers from all over the place. I think these kids would be a lot prouder to be Americans. A good case in point was, everybody knows Oprah Winfrey, right? A lot of people hate Oprah. She's a self-made billionaire. But Oprah would go to Africa and give all this money to all these kids over there in Africa, and people back here in the U.S. would give her a hard time. Why are you helping out these people in Africa? Why don't you take care of some of the problems here in the U.S.? And people just bashing her, and she said, because she asked people here in the U.S., if you could have anything, what would you want? And these poor people here in the U.S. would say, well, I want the new iPhone. I want a new MP3 player. I want this new $300 pair of Michael Jordan sneakers. But she said when she would go to Africa, she'd ask them, if you could have anything, what would you want? And they say, I would want a white shirt school uniform so that I could go to school to better myself, get an education. And she said that's why she's like, the priorities are wrong here with these kids. And a lot of people, they don't get it. I agree with her 100%. But that's because I've actually seen the other side of the coin here. And a lot of people haven't. They bash her because they haven't been outside the U.S. A lot of people have nutcase politician, Cortez, full-blown nutcase. She has never been anywhere in the world except for her sociology college classroom, where her socialist professor told her about the world. It's like that your business school instructors have never been outside of college. They've never ran a business. They're not teaching you business. Likewise, these social and political science professors are nutcases. They are. So the poor girl she started life with a handicap, and she's screwed. She is. Somebody's going to end up putting a bullet in her head. Back to our story. And I don't mean to vent on y'all, all right? But I wish everyone would get outside and actually see the poor in the world. So I've had the advantage of being a Green Beret. I've been to 41 countries, and I don't get to go to the nice countries. I don't get to go to the resorts. I don't get to go to the Bahamas. I don't get to go do a Viking cruise ship tour on the rivers. No. I go to all the shitholes. That's part of my job. I go to all the different shitholes on the planet. I'm completely good with that. Not complaining. Guys, you know I love my career. But SF guys are always all over the world. At any given time, Green Berets and other soft forces, but for the most part, Green Berets are doing FID, Foreign and Total Defense. That's training other countries to fight for themselves. And at any given time, they are in 40 to 60 plus different countries at any given time. I'll let that sink in, because you're looking damn near half the number of countries on the planet have Green Berets there helping their military. And we were gone just as much before 9/11. I want that to sink in too. We're always in the wrong place at the right time. For example, one of the guys that was on my A team, I don't know if y'all remember Todd from my Haiti war story, the guy that sprayed the donkey with the pepper spray. Todd was also on this same deployment I'm going to talk about today. Todd he went to the site survey team for a couple years, and while he was overseas surveying embassies and ambassador houses and everything, gathering data so that if Delta ever had to come to a rescue, the data was already collected. His A-team was inside the embassy in Kenya when it got blown up. The embassy came down like a card castle around the room that they were in. None of the guys got hurt. None of the Green Berets got hurt. I mentioned that I was sitting in Bahrain, sitting right next to a sailor whose ship was the Cole. His wife was on the Cole. It was getting ready to come to Bahrain. It stopped to get gas in Yemen when it got blown up. We've had guys shot at in the desert. This stuff never makes the news. Likewise, that brings us to our story time with Carl. It's about one of my deployments to Ethiopia, of all places. All right, so how it works out is the State Department will give money, aid, to a country, okay? And of course these, whether it's $2 million or what, we'll give you this financial aid for your country to make your country better. And we can pick any country on the planet, Egypt, in this case we'll use Ethiopia. I want to say they gave them like $2 million. We'll use easy round numbers. It was actually a lot more than that to feed their people, right? Well, Ethiopia immediately said, well, we want to buy $2 million worth of AK-47s. No, you have to take this money and buy medical gear for your country, blah, blah, blah. No, we want guns, all right? Well, okay, well, you can spend, I think it was like $5 million. You have to spend $3 million on medical, and you have to buy it all from U.S. companies, and $2 million worth of guns. And so, all right, well, we want $2 million worth of AK-47s. Nope, you have to buy from American companies. Okay, we want $2 million worth of U.S. military hardware. We're going to give you $1.5 million worth of military hardware, but we're also going to send a company of special forces, Green Berets, to teach you how to use it. And so you see what they're doing. We're giving taxpayers money to these other countries, but at the same time, the State Department makes them buy stuff from the U.S. and everything. And instead of that extra $400,000 for the State Department to give them guns, they had to have a company of Green Berets come. Okay, that's fine, except the State Department doesn't give that money to the Department of Defense. Department of Defense then has to send a company of Green Berets. That company of Green Berets happened to be my company, Charlie Company. At the exact same time, the State Department is giving money to all these other countries doing similar things. For example, Alpha Company, my same battalion at the time, this before it was a SIF company, they were in a neighboring country called Eritrea, which was originally part of Ethiopia. They'd broken off decade earlier, nice war between Eritrea and Ethiopia. So anyways, Alpha Company was going to Eritrea to teach small unit tactics, teach them how to use their new equipment. Charlie Company, my company at the time, New Green Beret, we are going to Ethiopia. Never been to Ethiopia. As soon as we get the mission, comes down from Starfleet Command, you guys are going to Ethiopia to teach small unit tactics, raids and ambushes and everything. Now, you can't call it a ambush. You can't call it a raid because humanitarian reasons, we're not supposed to be teaching other militaries. We're teaching raids and ambushes, small unit tactics, teaching the art of war. That's what we do. But we had to change the names on the classes. So we start planning out our different classes and everything. And back then there was no PowerPoint projectors and classes and stuff like that. We used an easel with dry eraser markers, and we had pads of what we call butcher block. Is butcher block paper. It was paper that would go right on an easel, and we would write out our classes and draw pictures and everything ahead of time on these butcher. I still have a couple of these classes. The butcher block rolls of paper are rolled up, and you can take the rubber bands off of them, hang them up on the easel, and I can flip through and teach these classes. I've taught medical and sniper classes and chem bio, NBC classes and everything, but that's how we did our classes. But for Ethiopia, we were also going to be teaching them, because you're teaching them small unit tactics. We bought, I want to say it was like 100,000 rounds of AK-47 blank ammo, and we went and checked, and sure enough, they don't have any blank adapters. So then we had to hunt on the internet, and we had to buy blank adapters. We had to buy AK-47 sight adjustment tools, because it takes a special tool for drifting the front sight of AK-47, because part of what we were going to do is basic rifle marksmanship. We were going to teach them, we were going to actually zero their AK-47s, because when we asked if they had sight adjustment tools, they said no. Okay, no big deal. Spend taxpayers' money on it. We had our op fund. We were told the living conditions were a little austere. Couple buildings, no electricity, no bathrooms, no nothing. They were giving us a couple, it's like two small warehouse buildings. So what do we need, guys? We'll bring all of our gear. We need electricity. All right, we'll bring a generator. We need to have radios, this, that, and the other. No big deal. We start packing up all of our equipment. We need bathrooms. Okay, well, the embassy coordinated for us to have a couple porta potties there. Okay, I think we might have even flown in with them. So we're gonna have a couple porta potties. You need a shower. Well, there's no shower there. I don't grasp that. Okay, how do we solve that? Green Berets, we're going to figure out how to do it. In our big catalog of gear that we could borrow from Starfleet Command, there's a place up in Kentucky that's just a big warehouse storing area for military equipment that SF units can borrow from there. You sign it out. I won't get into the name. I don't want you guys searching it on the internet. But basically, you could sign for everything from guns and lasers, sniper rifles, vehicles, all kinds of stuff. We found there was a chemical tent with showers for decontaminating people. Okay, so we signed for that. We're going to bring it, and we're not going to use it for decontaminating troops. We're going to use it for washing our asses. Okay, packed it all up. And so anyways, we got everything ready to go, and it came time to depart. They're no longer in service, but one of the last trips that I actually made on one of these planes is an old C-141. I think it's called a Starlifter or something like that. It's a narrow, long jet, cargo jet. It's kind of like a C-130, but it had jet engines. Not big, tall for hauling trucks like a C-5 or a C-17. Long, narrow, longer than a C-130, but roughly the same footprint. You could put vehicles in it, just not big ones. A lot longer, and it's a jet, so it would fly a lot faster. So anyways, we're going to actually parachute into Ethiopia. Long flight. We laid up in Europe, I think 8 hours, got our partying in there. We get back on the plane and flying over to Ethiopia. I was going to be the primary jump master. So we get there, some of the other teams decided, all right, they're not going to jump, blah, blah, blah. My team's still going to jump. We don't know any better. So anyways, we open up the doors of the plane, and I remember that you face towards the front of the plane, everybody's there, and it's a static line jump. This is before I went to Halo school. Everybody hooks up, you got to inspect the doorway and lean outside. Shit, the air is hot. I mean, it's hot outside already. And jet exhaust coming down the side of the plane. I look over the assistant jump master. He sends all his guys out the door, and it's loud. You can't hear anything. You do everything, hand and arm signals. He sends out. He looks at me, gives me thumbs out. He goes out the plane. I grab my guys, start sending them out the door, and before you even have time to be scared, my last guy goes out the door, and I out the doorway, jump out. You're supposed to reach down, put your hands on your reserve to keep your reserve parachute, which is on your front, from getting snagged on anything. I'm always too scared to do that. My hands automatically go up to grab the risers, which is not what you want to do, but that's just how I always jump. By the time I got out, man, my risers were up. Anyways, parachute opened beautifully. And daylight jump, we usually would never jump during the day, but again, we're just infilling. And I look down, and there's just fields. There's nothing in the fields. They're all just dirt. But I see soldiers and everything. It's weird because they're all Ethiopian soldiers. And come down, and it's supposed to, because the air is so thin at altitude, the ground altitude of Ethiopia is way above sea level. I don't remember, it's like 6,000, 7,000, 9,000 feet above sea level. It's a long ways above sea level. So the air is thinner. So we were told, hey, you're going to hit really, really hard. That's why some of the teams didn't want to jump, blah, blah, blah. I hit like a baby, landed right in the field, feet and knees together, nice little fall over the side. Before I was even up, I had 3 or 4 soldiers there with AK-47s, not pointed at me. They were just running with them like that. I thought they were going to point them at me. They immediately helped me start packing my parachute. They wanted to carry my rucksack. They wanted to carry my parachute. Their English was okay. They were scared to death of me. I don't know why. But then we get back on the trucks, they load us all up, and we start driving to our base. We're going to be staying at this big military base right outside Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. And as I start driving, I see there's a guy got his plow behind his ox, and he's pushing his plow through the field. It's not a field. There's no dirt. He's literally running this plow through a field of the little gas grill rock that you have in your gas grill at your house, those little chunks of lava rock. That's what he's running his plow through. And because I want that to sink in. I don't know if you all remember back in the 80s, there was this big concert called Live Aid where they raised all this money for Ethiopia because there was a big famine there. And the reason why there was a big famine is because they basically get one crop a year. And if that crop goes bad, there's no food for the rest of the year. Now, that whole Live Aid was a disaster. All the food was bought. It was dropped off at the ports. There was no money put aside for trucks to haul it, no coordination. A lot of it rotted there in the ports. That's another story. That's why you don't let civilians do international aid. But so I drive by the guy and keep going, and there are houses, and they're worse than Afghanistan. They're basically mud huts with grass roofs, something like the Flintstones, except no stone roof, no, literally thatched roof, curtains hanging in the windows. There might be pieces of glass in windows that you could tell were taken from other buildings, things like that. You got the little old lady, she's sitting there bouncing her newborn, and she's got like 9 kids running around. Just crazy stuff. And all the kids running along the side of the road. And one of them I can see from a distance, he's got a toy. He's pushing this as like a wire, and he's got a truck with like a long handle on it, and the shiny truck. As we get closer to it, he's running down the side of the road with this truck. He had made a truck out of like cut up Coke cans and stuff. He had bent the metal and riveted it together, and you could tell this thing was old. This was their one toy that they had. It was I want that to sink in. It was made out of trash. And there was this one kid, he's running red sweatpants, no shirt, little kid compared to the other ones, and his ass is hanging out. The back of his sweatpants are cut out. The ass is missing all the way down to the back of his knees. And I asked the guy there, and it's because, he's not potty trained yet. I found out later on he was. We ended up calling him Britches, that was his name, because we would always give Britches like the candy from our MREs and bottles of water and everything. Then the other kids would beat him up and take it and everything. But I found out Britches was probably 5. But his mom had cut the back out of his sweatpants, which were now like capris because he was larger. She'd cut them out of, when he was like 2 years old because he wasn't potty trained yet. So I want that to sink in. That's the kind of poor we were dealing with in Ethiopia. Pretty crazy. So we show up at our base, and it's just a couple of buildings, 3 buildings. We set up our shower tent. It's basically it was a GP medium, for those of you that know anything about the military, a green canvas tent, and then we set up this chemical biological decontamination shower system inside of it. So basically, the 80 guys in the company could go in and do one big group shower. We'd have like 5 or 6 guys in there at a time. We would do MREs. We had all of our equipment delivered. MREs for breakfast and dinner, breakfast and lunch, and then dinner we had set up, we would drive into town, and there in the capital there was I wish I could remember her name. She was an American, Ethiopian descent. She was an American lady, and she took all her money she had made in America, and she went back to Addis Ababa. She opened up a restaurant there. She had a good working relationship with the U.S. Embassy because she's still a U.S. citizen, dual citizenship. So she was basically the super elite rich person in country, and her English was great. She would make us dinner, American chow, good stuff, and we'd visit with her. So intel for the embassy, coordination with stuff, everything. I'd go to the embassy. That was our nearest medical facility, was the embassy. They didn't even have a defibrillator there. They had a physician's assistant. Let me rephrase that. They had a defibrillator there, but it didn't work. We found that out because a trip after ours, it was actually a trip before ours, 3rd group, there was a master sergeant from a scuba team who had a heart attack. He'd been pounding too much creatine, and by the time the helicopter got him to the embassy and their defibrillator didn't work, he ended up dying. Crazy shit like that. Died in a training accident. Good stuff. set up our facility. We had a couple porta potties, which was weird because you sit there in the porta potty, and of course you've got dysentery because you're eating food in Africa, and that fly would land in the corner of your mouth. And you know that fly had just been sitting on some Lincoln log about 24 inches below you. Yeah, nasty place. Guys got sick a lot. But driving back and forth to dinner, and sometimes we'd go for breakfast, depending on what the training schedule was. I remember one time going in for breakfast in the morning, and all the kids would be running, and they would have sparkling white button-up long sleeve shirts on. Now it's hot, and nice pants. And the girls all had sparkling white long sleeve button-up white shirts and long skirts. And they were all running, they were going to school. Now the cool part about school was when they rang the bell at, I want to say it was like 8 a.m. or 9, whatever time it was, if you're not there before the bell, you don't get into school. That makes sense, right? Nada, worse than that. They only had so many seats in school. So if you had to walk 5 miles, 8 miles, 10 miles to get to school, you better be there, not just on time, but you better be like the first 150 kids through the door, because if you're not, they close the door. They count the kids in, they close the door. You don't get to go to school that day. That's not the end of it. You now have to walk home and tell your mother, who wants you to have a better life than she had, why you're not in school. Right? So that's how much these kids valued getting into school. And they'd be out there crying, the doors would be locked, and the kids would sit there just hoping one of the kids had to leave, so maybe they'd let another kid in. Really, really tragic stuff. Tragic. And that's just how it was. Poor country. Starting off school, we were supposed to actually start off with a jump school. We got there, and remember, we brought our own parachutes. We brought a couple of our riggers with us. That's not a derogatory term. A rigger is a packing American. He is a guy that packs the parachutes. Okay, he rigs your parachute, makes sure everything's perfect, makes your bundles, all that stuff. It is not a derogatory term. So our riggers were there. We brought some riggers with us to repack our parachutes. The plan was they had bought a couple C-130 aircraft from America. We're supposed to be jumping with them, but what we kind of really wanted to do was we wanted to jump some of their older Soviet aircraft that they had. We'd never jumped out of them. So anyways, they bring us down to this big Quonset hut warehouse, no air conditioning. They're like, yes. So we're going to start it off with a jump school. We were going to teach a lot of their new soldiers how to parachute. We were going to do this big ceremony. We brought all these American jump wings with us. We were going to pin them on the soldiers, have a big class, pinning on jump wings. And so anyways, they get in there, going to show us if we jump with their parachutes, with their jump masters on their aircraft, we get a set of Ethiopian jump wings, which looks cool on your uniform. You actually wear them on the right side. So like my uniform, if you've ever seen pictures of me, I'd have my Halo wing, my Halo jump master wings, my master jump wings, static line jump master, my air assault wings, and then on this side I would usually wear my Russian foreign jump wings, or my Bahraini or Kuwaiti or whatever. You're allowed to wear one set of foreign jump wings. I like my Russian ones because at the time nobody had Russian jump wings. They all had Soviet Union jump wings. I'm old, okay. Fast forward back to where we were. So we go into this unair conditioned thing to inspect their parachutes, and they've got shelves of just these parachutes stacked up, and I've never seen a Ethiopian. Basically, these are all Soviet parachutes. They pull one of them off, and as he pulls it off the shelf, it had dry rotted to the parachute underneath it, and actually tore the nylon open and pulled it up, and he goes to show, and like it's all just falling apart. He said, no problem. The parachutes at the bottom are in better condition. What? No. So anyways, we could not come up with enough parachutes that our riggers would consider serviceable to even do one pass in an aircraft. We weren't going to let them jump our parachutes. So anyways, that kind of scratched that. Okay, so we're not parachuting anymore. All right, let's start the next segment, which is teaching them small unit tactics. So I had my little SUV. My A-team had a couple little SUVs. Driving my SUV, following the other guys out. They're taking me to where my little training area is going to be. There's a set of bleachers to put all my students in. And I'm going to have an interpreter. He's a major, but the captains and lieutenants in the Ethiopian army don't give this guy any respect at all. So like, why not? So anyways, I find out he's part of the political party that like basically helped Eritrea break off. He's still in Ethiopia. They keep him in the military as an interpreter. He's a major. He still makes major pay, but he's not allowed to be a leader. He'll never be trusted in combat. These guys were, it had only been a few years since the big war where Eritrea had broke off. How close was it? Well, these guys would show up to classes with full magazines, with actual frag grenades and grenades all over the kit. Their kit consisted of an AK, a vest that held 3 magazines, and it had a grenade pouch on either side. And these guys were carrying live frag grenades to class. Live magazines filled with ammo. No big deal. Anyways, we're driving out there, and there's all these piles of ant mounds on the side. I don't know if I ever told you guys, but one of my favorite things to do in sniper school, because you have fire ants on the sniper range, when you go out to paint the steel, I love to take the empty spray paint cans and I push it into the side of the fire ant mound. And then when we go back to the sniper firing line, we start shooting. Once you've hit your target, we'd like to, and you knew your wind correction was correct, we'd shoot the bottom of the spray paint cans. It would blow up the fire ant mounds. And then when the next guys had to go out to paint steel after lunch, they'd be out there painting the steel target, and the whole time all these pissed off fire ants would be going up their legs. Hilarious stuff. It's the kind of stuff SF guys do to each other. All right. So anyways, I've got my SUV. We're doing like 20 miles an hour. I'd spin that because I want to knock over one of these ant mounds. Yeah, not so much. I hit this thing. It turns out it's not a fire ant mound. It is a termite mound. And though it looks like soft dirt that's piled, some of them were 3 feet high, some of them were 9 feet high. This thing is as hard as lava rock. I hit this thing. I ended up banging my head on the steering wheel. No airbags because it's a rental over in Ethiopia. I bent the bumper so bad it was rubbing on the tire. And yeah, these termites don't move at all. And they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're literally everywhere. There's no trees, nothing but scrub trees and everything. It's just crazy stuff. So anyways, I get my little set of bleachers, and my students would show up. Now we're doing train the trainer. So all the different units in Ethiopia, all over the whole country, they've all sent some of their senior non-commissioned officers, their sergeants, and I've got students in the bleachers, and they're sitting there. They don't really pay attention to nothing in the classes. And my class that I had to teach, and there was a different list of them. Some guys, Art Pettit and Todd, were teaching movement techniques, IMTing. I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. Low crawl, high crawl, stuff like that. We had guys that were teaching mortars. I was teaching raids and ambushes. That's what I was teaching. I like technical stuff. I picked the big classes that actually take thinking. These guys weren't into it. They weren't. My interpreter would be like, yeah, Carl, blah, blah. They're just talking, no big deal. I start teaching the classes. And but we would run PT with these guys, and so we go out for run. These boys could run because they were used to being at that altitude. We were not. So we'd go out on runs, and they would smoke us on the runs. These guys could run marathons, They'd be out and running. Their uniform was most of them wore a jumpsuit. Some of them had camouflage tank tops and camouflage fatigues, but most of the new soldiers wore blue jumpsuits. We go for a run, a 5-mile run, and they would smoke our bags, all the fat Americans, right? Because me standing next to a bunch of Ethiopians, I look fat. I've got chipmunk cheeks compared to these guys. I'm a fat American. They would all smoke us on the run, but then we'd get back and everybody covered in sweat, can't breathe. But then we'd do 100 push-ups and they could do 9. We do, 5 sets of 10 pull-ups, and they could do 1 maybe. We do all these other exercises. All of a sudden, they weren't smiling anymore. All of a sudden, we do moving ammo cans over our heads, and we do rifle PT and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, they weren't smiling anymore. So we made it pretty clear to them the fat Americans were in better shape than they were. We got to the AK-0 range. Now remember, we brought all these blanks. We spent, oh God knows how much money on AK sight adjustment tools. So we get there, and it's a cool part. This was our first deployment, right? We just got a couple of these new reflex sights. It was a holographic weapon sight, reflex sight. Kind of like a Seymour, but it ran off of tritium, had a single lens. Nobody uses them anymore, but this was the first edition of a red dot sight to the M4 series of weapons, the SOP mod kit. We got a couple of them right before the deployment. I snatched up one of them, so I'm there, zeroed this thing. This thing was great. It was awesome. From there, we went on the aim points, from there, EOTechs. But this was the first one, this little reflex sight. I remember it well because I would actually mount. I got a separate mount for my PVS-14 I could put behind it. And looking through my PVS-14, I could see that dot. And it was awesome. I could shoot in the dark accurately out to 200-300 meters, and I could never do that before then with an M4 because we didn't have all the PQ2 illuminators, all that stuff. It was a neat piece of kit, guys, really neat piece of kit. I want to say this was 97, 98, so it's been a while. So the guys come up and they've got their guns. Their job is to get down. Now, their senior soldiers are like, look, we're going to get them zeroed first, and then you guys can train us the classes. Okay, fine. So this was kind of cool because we get to sit back and watch their sergeants run all the soldiers through zeroing the weapons. Okay, cool. So we're just kind of standing there. The first soldier comes, he gets down with his AK, points it at the target. We got the little zero target at 25 meters. Click. He reaches over the top of the gun. Normally you would charge with this hand. Pull the charging handle back, eject the round, let it go forward, shoot the next round. Maybe he had a bad bullet. He didn't do that. He reached over the top of the gun, pulled the charging handle back, held it to the rear, but not far enough back to strip another round. It just far enough to eject that bullet. And not very far, just a little bit. Fell out of the gun. He picked up the bullet, licked the primer. Let me show you how he did it. The bullet came out. He licked the primer, stuck it in the sand, stuck it back in the gun, let the bolt go forward. Boom, click. He did it again, reach over the top, the bullet would pop out. He'd lick the primer, stick it in the sand, stick it in the gun, bang, click. And he just quickly shot his 5-round group. And I'm like, whoa, stop. What was, I asked him, interpreter, what's he doing? And he's like, call. The firing pin in his AK-47 is so worn because it's so old that by licking the primer, sticking it in the sand, a grain of sand would stick to the primer. Then when he threw it in a gun, the firing pin, when he pulled the trigger, would hit the piece of sand. The piece of sand would hit the primer, the gun would go off. Ingenious. Crazy. Why would you do that? So basically, if this guy had to go to war, he was having to do that for every bullet. Now, this is a gun that's select fire. You can put it on full auto. But he was so well rehearsed in having to lick the primer. I bet this guy could shoot 20 rounds a minute doing this. Accurate rounds, 20 rounds a minute. Bang, click. Bang, click. I mean, he could, and it just blew me away. And I thought about it, I was like, dude, replace the firing pin. It's like 9 minutes to replace the firing pin in an AK. It's nothing. Carl, we don't have replacement firing pins. We don't have them. Dude, buy them. We tried to buy AKs. Your country wouldn't let us buy them. Now I want this to sink in, because the amount of money that we spent on one AK sight adjustment tool, the amount of money that I spent on one blank adapter to go over the end of the barrel of an AK-47, just one blank adapter would have bought 100 AK firing pins. So you see where our priorities were wrong, simply because we didn't have good intel. We could have fixed these guys, could have fixed them, could have fixed every AK in all these units. Instead, we bought blank adapters. Craziness. We'd walk around, and of course, part of our job as a Green Beret, and everybody's job as an American, is part of your job is to gather intel. So when we come back from these trips, we'd always have the intel weenies come down to interview us. One thing that I saw there, if you ever, back then, if you went to the CIA fact book about every country, it would say that Ethiopia had, it was like 30 SA-2 surface air missiles. That's the missile that shot down the U-2 spy plane. Anyway, yeah, Ethiopia did have them. I'm looking through the fence that was all grown branches, and I could see the parking lot for the trailers. And I'm looking at them. These things are all major disrepair, worthless. There's no way they would ever fly. So anyway, that's part of what I reported back when we did our debriefing, that yeah, technically they've bought these SA-2 missiles. They've got these SA-2 missiles. Those SA-2 missiles would never fly, at least not the ones that I saw. And we're doing one meal a day in town, doing our classes, kind of a boring deployment. One cool part was that you'd have to pull guard duty at night, 24/7. Why? Because you're in the middle of a combat zone, not combat zone, but you're in a foreign country. And again, we're on an air base, military air base, and it's weird. But at night, sometimes the guys would see this Black Panther would come into the campsite at night to go hit the trash pile. And it scared the hell out of some of the support kids whose jobs were to work the radios and stuff like that. They were still there. They had to take their turns pulling guard duty at night. One kid, he had like blood-curdling screams one night, just screaming top of his lungs. And we thought for sure like the Panther had got this kid. Turns out he was having nightmares about his childhood or something. Mommy, make the bad man stop, or something like that, craziness. But sometimes at night, you'd see this big dinosaur-looking thing and could never figure out what it was. I'd be watching it with the night vision goggles, could not figure out what this thing was. Talking it over with my interpreter, who I got to be real good friends with. I would play chess with him in the chow hall, and turns out it was a porcupine. Which they kind of think is a cool animal over there. These porcupines are a lot different than the ones here in the US. Guys, look at the size of this quill. I brought back hundreds of these quills. These things are awesome. Cool part, when you shoot a porcupine with a 308, quills go everywhere, by the way. I don't know how I would even know something like that. We would, on weekends when we were off, some guys would want to go to the city, hang out, go shopping, cool. I would go to the sniper range a lot of times. I like to, now they didn't have a per se sniper range, but I would drive up onto the volcano. They had a volcano nearby, even higher, and I wanted to gather angle data. Which is, it's hard to get high angle firing for a sniper. Having a sniper tower that's 50 feet high when you're shooting at a 900 meter target, that is not much angle. It doesn't work. So when I heard they had a volcano they would let me shoot from, I went out to the volcano to shoot. And we would do classes out there, demo classes and stuff. For example, there was a trash dump, and they said that's where we could do our demo range, actually blow demo up. So the engineer guys went out there, and there's baboons out there. And they're like, well, what about if we blow something up and there's a baboon there? And they're like, well, it's no big deal. Okay, that told me that it was okay to shoot baboons, okay to kill baboons, must be okay to shoot them. So M24, I had the baboons make the most awesome faces when you shoot. It's cool. We found out afterwards when the trucks actually pulled up to do the demo range and they saw that we were shooting baboons. Yeah, they didn't really want us doing that. They meant if one accidentally got blown up, it was meant to be, but don't go out of your way to actually shoot God's creatures here. My bad. I actually learned a lot shooting at elevation there, because from a sniper standpoint, I put it out in classes that, for every 1,000-foot change in elevation above sea level from where you had zeroed your gun, every change at 1,000 feet, it changes at the air getting thinner or thicker, depending whether you're going up or down. A 1,000-foot increase makes the air thinner. It will actually make the bullet hit 1 minute of angle higher. So if you're shooting at 1,000 meters, it's now hitting 10 inches higher. Well, from where I had zeroed at Fort Campbell at 460 feet to 600 feet, depending which sniper range you're on Fort Campbell, I'm there and I'm now well over 9,000 feet. I want that to sink in. That's 8,000-foot change. That's 80 inches at 1,000 meters that my bullet, my point of aim, point of impact moved. So I'd always theoretically been told all this, but I had never shot such extreme elevation changes. So for example, to shoot a target at 1,000 meters or 1,100 meters, I'm using like 8-2 on the BDC on my scope. Crazy stuff. Angle firing down into the inside of the volcano. I could put targets anywhere I wanted, so I'd walk down 500 meters, put my target, and then I have to walk all the way back up, and I'm shooting, and this thing goes deep. This is a deep volcano. Well, I'm sitting there and got the spotting scope trying to look at my holes, because I don't want to walk back down there. And so I've got a nice spotting scope, and I focus, and I catch movement off to the side. So I turn the spotting scope a little bit, and I look deep down into the bottom of the volcano. Turns out there's buildings down there, huts and stuff. There are people living in the bottom of the volcano, and I'm shooting bullets down into it. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have been doing that either. I didn't know they were there. Nobody told me, in my defense. We had been there teaching for a while, and Alpha Company, remember back at the beginning I said Alpha Company went to Eritrea, and then Charlie Company, my company at the time, we went to Ethiopia. Well, it turns out Alpha Company got done 2 weeks before Charlie Company did. So as soon as their C5 Galaxy was wheels up, they packed up all their gear and left. Eritrea turned around and attacked Ethiopia. So all of a sudden we find ourselves at war. Never made the news, never made CNN. How did I find this out? I found this out because of the explosions and the commandos that, remember I had sergeants from all the different units in the whole country are all in my bleachers every day in class. And all of a sudden my commandos were gone. The commandos that actually lived on the airfield there, they were all loaded up, they left in the dark. We had MiGs strafing the runways. They were doing dry runs, practicing to go hit Eritrea. We had Hind D gunships flying around and Hind B Bravo gunships. They don't have the chin turret. They've just got a couple machine guns mounted in the nose. Got to remember, this is Ethiopia. But it was kind of cool seeing behind gunships and not at a parade or not on an airfield. These things were actually out, armed to the teeth, flying around. It was kind of weird. I don't know if you guys remember back then, remember AIDS, the disease came from Africa, and very rampant there. It's like 80% of the prostitutes in the capital were known to be HIV positive. The women that came in for prenatal care, because remember, there's no TV there. So when the sun goes down and dad's not in the field anymore, the only hobby dad has is to go have sex with his wife, and that's why he's got 9 kids. The women that would come in for prenatal care, they would all run an HIV test on them. 50%, I want that to sink in, 50% of all the women, all of them coming in for prenatal care were HIV positive. So anyways, we stayed away. We didn't want anything to do with any of them except for one guy. One of our support kids, I want to say he was a cook, Jeter. Maybe he was a commo guy. Jeter was one of our support kids, a little skinny black guy. Jeter was a great guy, but he loved women. So walking around camp, of course, all the wives of the commandos would look at Jeter like he's a rock star because Jeter is an American. They all want their ID card. They all want to leave Ethiopia. So when all the commandos got loaded up on trucks and driven down to the border with Eritrea, all of a sudden, Jeter was the most popular guy on base. He was out all night long servicing all the wives there. Funny, so I'm like, dude, here, take the whole box of condoms. Just don't come back with anything, please. Crazy stuff. So anyways, my commandos left the bleachers, but the rest of them, I still had all the sergeants. I walked up right in front of them. I was like, look, today we're going to do a demonstration where I'm going to give you an explanation, a lecture, and then after that we're going to do a practical application on what I'm getting ready to teach you. After that, the next time you're going to do it, it's going to be live on the border, live combat. Let that sink in. Well, I had told these guys that they needed to find notebooks to take notes in, which is no big deal. That's kind of common. It's rude to not show up at a class to take notes, prepared to take notes. These guys showed up with notebooks. How poor is Ethiopia? I started looking at this guy. I saw he had a full page of notes. He had opened his notebook. Both pages were full. I was like, wow, this guy's taking a lot of notes. And then the interpreter was like, no, he's taking notes in between the lines. Like what? So yeah, they actually showed me he needed paper to write on. He had a notebook from school. It had already been used. It was already full, top to bottom, both sides, every page in the book. And he was writing, taking notes in between the other line. I want that to sink in because a lot of people we're spoiled here. The homeless people in Las Vegas, when I walked the SHOT Show, I used to give them coffee, but now they don't even look up at me anymore because they're sitting there with their cardboard sign with their big Galaxy smartphone checking their Facebook account. You know, there is no such thing as poor in America. The people on welfare have got AC, a smartphone given to them, and they make more money a month than the soldiers in Ethiopia make in a year. There's no such thing as poor in America in my eyes compared to the rest of the planet. All right, so I was amazed these guys are taking notes like that. It was crazy. So anyways, we're like, hey, we're getting ready to do our final mission, the final FTX. We're gonna move dismounted, and my support kids were going to play the part as the bad guys. So we had some of our guns set up with blanks. We had blank adapters for these guys. Now you take your live ammo out of your magazines and put the blanks in, put the blank adapter on your AK. They wouldn't do it. Why not? Well, because they could be attacked at any moment. Remember, they're at war with Eritrea. So what do? Well, we bought all these blanks with taxpayers' money. We have blank adapters. We finally convinced them to empty 2 magazines of live ammo, fill them with blanks. They could keep 1 live magazine and 2 frag grenades, and blank adapter on the gun. If a real gunfight broke out, they could quickly take off their blank adapter. That was the best we could do. These guys were adamant. They were not going anywhere without live ammo. We're gonna move dismounted. I had made a building out of cloth, basically 4-sided. You put up poles like a tent. I had the building wrapped around it in the doorway, and I'd painted it in my backyard at my house to make it look like that was gonna be the final building for them to do the raid on. And it was going to work good. It was going to work real good. So we drive out there. I got to set my target up. We get out there, and there's a ravine on the side. No big deal. We'll set the. We drive out there because we had picked the spot on the map, and you can see it's a nice level area. But there's a ravine, and I mean like a deep ravine. It's like a 60-foot drop ravine. It's only like 8 feet across. No big deal. There's a bridge there. The road comes up right next to it, and there's a little bridge, a little hand bridge. You go across, and we set up our little target. We're going to be coming from the other end. We're going to move so many miles. So as we go back, we tell the guys, all right, blank adapters, 2 mags. They don't have any night vision. You know, we're going to do all the travel. Make sure you've got enough food for 2 days and 2 canteens. Because we were going to have 2 canteens. We told them to have the same load that we had. Well, I'm looking at their soldiers, and they're over digging through our trash. And I'm like, hey, what are you all doing? And they explained to me that they didn't have canteens. What they were doing is they were getting our empty water bottles that we were throwing away, and they were taking our water bottles, and they'd tie a string around it, around the cap and around the bottom, and they would sling it around them. And that was what these guys were going to use as a canteen. And I was, holy shit, once again, I'm amazed by how poor these guys are. After that, we gave them cases of water. Didn't want them using our dirty bottles. The guys would spit Copenhagen in them and everything's gross. And they were amazed that we were just giving them stuff. Crazy stuff. So we do our movement techniques, and I've got pictures, guys. I'll show you if you all ever come visit. I might even put a couple up on Patreon so you can see them. You're just moving with these guys, and they would do everything right. These guys would listen to everything you told them to do. We get up there, we put in our security positions, and this is the final hit. So like company commanders there, battalion commanders come in, you got all these other VIPs there. Now they've got all their vehicles parked on the other side of the ravine. It is balls ass dark. There's like zero illume. We come up, but my role players, they've got a little campfire going, a little fire, so it made it easier for our guys to find it. Put up the support position. Recon teams, security teams, hey, we're good, there's nobody there, nobody ready to pounce on us. Support opens up, and my guys do the textbook support, the assault across the objective. Everything's perfect. Done. We end the problem right there. Instead of making them walk all the way back, we're going to bring trucks up for these guys. It's the end of the deployment. From here, we go to graduation. It's going to be awesome. Everybody did great. One of the guys on one of the other teams, Ski was his name. Ski was a nice guy. Talking to him, and you could see, now here's our objective. They got the fires. You got a light, a few people with headlamps, but for the most part, the fire and the lights of the vehicles, you can see, because the vehicles parked on the other side of the ravine, they're from me to you. They're not very far away. Ski forgot that there was a ditch. He went to go get like an MRE or some water out of the back of one of the SUVs, and he didn't go to the bridge. He tried to just walk straight across. He couldn't see the ground because there's so many people standing around the fire. He walked straight to the vehicle. And all I hear is guys screaming, they need a medic, they need a medic. Divine intervention, you'll find I'm a big believer in divine intervention. The bottom of that ravine, guys, was all jagged rocks. I'm talking big, jagged, sharp rocks. Quills laying everywhere from where the porcupines would go up and down it. This thing is just like a god-awful mess. Except there was one spot of dirt, sand, soft beach sand, about 4 foot wide. That's it. He had fallen, Ski had fallen and landed on his back right there on that little patch of sand. So anyways, we get the backboard and everything, C-collar, chalk blocks, everything. We get ropes, we rappel down in, we get them. We got no way to bring the guy up. We don't have enough ropes to raise the thing. What do? We're trying, and every time we move him, his back is so tore up. We've shot him with Valium, we've shot him everything up. The boy was tore up bad. Okay, there's a way out of the ravine, but it's like 300 meters down, 400 meters down. There's a little place where it's cut down in with a road going across. I guess we got to carry him. So up on top of now, it's all jagged rocks, jagged the whole way. So it was a madhouse, big workout. Me, a couple of the other guys, we got the guy out, got him off to the embassy. He's just lucky to be alive. He's lucky he landed right there, pulled all the muscles in his back, but he literally landed perfect. His head and his back and his butt hit all at the same time. So he did not snap his neck, didn't snap his back, pulled every muscle, bruised from the top of his head all the way down through his butt, his calves, everything. Where his legs slapped on the ground, there's a big jagged rock about 2 foot tall with a spike on it right between his legs. Literally, guys, divine intervention. We have our little graduation, and it's just crazy stuff. I would want to keep the guys late in class, and the instructor would be like, Carl, they have to get to lunch. And I'd be like, I piss on them. If we miss lunch, they do dinner, but train to standard, not to time. And he's like, no, Carl, you don't understand. They get 1 meal a day. I want that to sink in. Their military provided them 1 meal a day. It was this gruel, and either you were there and you ate, but when they closed the doors to the chow hall, you were done. So once that sank in, I made sure the guys always made it to chow. Have our nice little graduation. We provided a lot of the food, big deal and everything. And my class was a lot smaller now because as each unit was being activated, their sergeants would disappear and they would head off. So literally, as we were packing up all our gear, waiting for the trucks to show up, for the forklifts to pack up our gear, because we're going to the airliner. The last of my guys, they were mine now because I had trained all these guys, because they'd even come to me. They're like, Carl, if you were to do a raid here on the map, how would you do it? And I'm like, oh, okay, what do I got? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, do I have tanks? Do I have BTR 50s, like those parked right there? And they start talking to each other. And like, yes, Carl, you have tanks. You have 2 tanks, and you have 5 BTR 50s. 60s, they were BTR 60s, 8-wheeled machines. I'm like, okay, well, this is how I would. The funny part, you see what I was doing? And they were coming to me to ask me to help them plan a raid they were getting ready to do on the border with Eritrea. Funny stuff, guys. Back and forth with the embassy, there was talk that they were going to leave 1 A-team in country to work as like a liaison between the 2 countries while they did peace talks. The team that was being left, they didn't have a medic, so I was grabbed from my team. Hey, all right, we're gonna, if the Pentagon says leave them before you guys fly, then that'll be the team to stay. And I was like, shit, I don't want to stay here. But I'm like, look, if I stay here, then that means you get me out of this SWIC assignment. You'll notice in my career, guys, I never went to Fort Bragg as an instructor. Never had to go be a drill sergeant, never had to do this. I'm like, look, if I stay with this A-team, because it's going to piss off my wife, I'm supposed to be going home tomorrow. If I stay, I'll stay, but you get me out of this assignment that I had coming up. And they did. They got me out of the assignment. Turns out we didn't stay. We ended up loading up. All the BTR 60s were driving by. Remember, that's that 8-wheeled Soviet armored personnel carrier. Squad of infantry inside. It's got a 14.5 or a 12.7 machine gun on the top of it. I want to say about 20 of them left. They were going to drive through Addis Ababa and then drive down to the border. we get all of our trucks loaded and we start driving. We get outside the gate and there's one of the BTR 60s parked on the side of the road, and my guys are waving at me, the guys I just done classes with, asking what happened. They're like, it's broke down. We start heading more to Addis, and there's another one broke down. Now remember, they had like 8 or 10 of these things. By the time we got to Addis, the capital, there was like 6 of them were on the side of the road, and they were halfway to the border. 6 out of the 10 had already broken down. So I can't imagine how many had actually made it to the border for the war. It's just tragic. And we knew, and we'd already planned out, look, if anything happened, if they turned on us, all we had to do was be able to fight, circle the wagons. We had a little Alamo set up, circle the wagons. We need to be able to hold them off long enough for the sun to go down. Once the sun went down, we could bring an AC-130 Spectre gunship in. We would then own the night, and then they could bring helicopters in to evac us out. That's the kind of plans that our troops on a FID mission to help a ally, that's the kind of stuff we had to do, because we didn't know at any moment these guys might turn on us. So that's just, you're training them, but you're not really training them. You don't teach them you teach them everything they know. You don't teach them everything that you know. It's just a tragic stuff. So we get down to Addis, we got to wait for the airplane to show up, and we're having to pull guard duty on our gear, our pallets, because they'll steal our stuff. Well, there's a bunch of Ethiopian airliners, commercial airliners parked there. Funny stuff. The ramp's down on one of them, the tail ramp. There's stairs on the back. So me and Chief Brown, I remember Chief Brown, it's me and him, it's our turn to pull guard duty. We went up inside the airplane, and he's like, Carl, you got your Leatherman on you? I'm like, yeah, why? Chief was a mobility guy, the desert mobility. He liked running the Humvees across the desert. He was up there in the cockpit. He needed 2 Leathermans. He was taking the compass out of the dash of the commercial airliner so that he could mount it inside his Humvee. He wanted an electronic compass. I'm like, that's kind of messed up. Well, if he's doing that, I started taking seat belts off of some of the seats because I wanted straps for my backboard, my medical backboard. And then I'm pulling under the seat life jackets. I've always wanted to try one of them, right? You know when you open a big door and you pull the thing and the lifeboat, inflatable lifeboat / slide opens up? Always wanted to pop one of those things and open a container, and there's a lever. You push the lever, it says flashlight in the cockpit. Push the lever, and a little thing pops open, there's a flashlight. There's another lever, and it says first aid. I push that lever, and thing pops up, there's a first aid kit there. I'm like, this is cool. There's another lever, bigger lever, and it says oxygen. I'm like, sweet, I get myself an oxygen bottle. I push the lever down, and all of a sudden, we hear movement in the back of the plane. So Chief stops. He's like, oh. And we thought somebody was coming up into the plane, and he's caught red-handed trying to get the compass out of the dash. We lean back, we look through the door, and all the oxygen masks had dropped in the airplane. We were firing off, probably $40,000 worth of oxygen was free flowing through the airplane right now. Yeah, you just shouldn't leave these things unlocked, parked on a secure airfield. What were you thinking? We ended up, plane got delayed. Some of the guys would go to the Addis Ababa bar, which is basically a disco. The guy had a boombox. They had a little dance floor. They were selling beers that were warm, and they had a flashlight. The DJ would flash at a disco ball, mirror disco ball. It didn't turn. It just hung from the ceiling, and he would shine his flashlight at it, and that was your light show. Some of the guys would go there. Some of the guys hung out at the pool, at the hotel. Poor guys, poor. Everything. There's Soviet stars everywhere from back in the former Soviet Union had built up a lot of places. Ethiopia was part of their empire. So anything nice that was built built in the Soviet era. But you'd see a guy just come walking by butt-ass naked, and he had his little pillow, his little bench, wooden bench with a pillow on top. And that was his only possession, and that was so he could sleep he put this pillow under his head while he slept in the gutter, and that was to keep his head off the ground so the worms wouldn't go up into his ears. It was just sad, real sad. Cargo plane finally came in, big cargo plane, and C-5 Galaxy. We got our flight back. I think we laid up again in Europe or something, but it got home. And remember, they had been at war our last couple weeks there, and it never made the news. I come home and everybody's, hey, how was your deployment? Blah blah blah. But you sit there and one, it's funny that you literally just, where we were carrying live ammo and frag grenades and radios everywhere, and we were worried about any minute we might have to turn on these guys, or maybe other people would attack, and now these guys would be our buddies. That's where we were at. And it never made the news in the States. So you come back and people are thinking, well, you just got back from another training trip. That's just, it's just late 90s. We're not at war with anybody. And nobody at home really understood that we were drawing combat pay while we were there. And 1 month of combat pay, but it's still, and you'd come home and just seeing things. It had nothing to do with the combat. The combat don't bother me. Combat's fun. But you'd see things like the pile of gun parts. And you thought that if I just had that box, I could have fixed all those AKs. You'd see things like ice cream. You'd see things like air conditioning in your vehicle that worked, a spare tire that wasn't already flat on your vehicle, roads that had lines painted on them, kids running around with real toys, wearing headphones and playing, and baseball fields. And guys, it just makes you appreciate just what we have, not just Americans, but what all of you out there that are watching this, we are all blessed. We always have been our whole lives. And I thank you guys for being my patron. I really do. But because we have lived blessed lives, you guys are helping support me. I'm helping to give back to the world, make the world a better place. But there's a lot of people out there that are not as fortunate as we are. And yeah, so Independence Day is a big holiday to me. My other big one is Thanksgiving, because I am very thankful for those two holidays. I count my blessings, my family, everything I have, my health, my friends, and I'm very thankful to have you guys. So anyways, that's this month's Story Time with Carl. It all starts with the story behind my porcupine quill. It's a hair is all it is. Costs nothing, but you'll see them on my shelves right next to knives that cost $5,000 that I'll never do anything with. Very, very fortunate to live where we do. But yeah, there's a story behind everything on my shelves, guys. So anyways, thank you again for your support. I hope all of you can make our question and answer video and the live stream video we're going to do here in a couple weeks. And would you all take care. Shoot straight.